I'm not like up in arms with Adam Ottavino. It did at times feel like somebody who felt, burned by the team, that they didn't bring him back or whatever. But I don't think that invalidates anything that he said. I don't think it's this like startling indictment that the Mets have the wrong manager and they need to move on from Carlos Mendoza. I don't think it's that. I just think it is this team is still trying to find their footing. And with a lot of the rumors about what they're considering doing this offseason, I think that's more true than ever, that David Stearns is really trying to put his fingerprints on this roster. Welcome back. Another edition of the Bleav in a Mets podcast. That is Jack McKessie. I am Chris Schubert, talking all things New York Mets. We have Adam Ottavino going scorched earth on the entire Mets organization. We have the Mets finalizing their coaching staff with the name that we all thought. And yes, we are going to get to our dream offseason because we are going to end this episode of the show on a positive note. Jack, how are you, my friend?
Chris, I'm doing okay. Reading Adam Ottavino's comments about my favorite baseball team made me a little sad because it started to spread some seeds of doubt in my mind about the future of the organization, I guess, at least the immediate future.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Ottavino's comments on his Baseball and Coffee, which I highly recommend. I think it's an excellent YouTube show that he does, and he breaks down pitchers at a level that you're just not going to get anywhere else, just because he's a former big league pitcher and did it at a high level and has been around these guys. And I just think his insight is great. His delivery is great. It's not a surprise that he was talking to the Rockies about taking over their baseball operations department, because he's a very smart baseball mind. And so when I saw social media abuzz about Adam Ottavino's comments, I said, okay, I'm not just going to read the quotes that are on social media or the little snippets that are out there. I'm going to go sit down and watch the entire Mets section. And he did about 50 minutes of his NL East breakdown on the Mets. I think it was 2 days ago, if you're listening to this on Friday, the day that we are recording. And I thought it was a fair assertion of where the Mets are at. I thought the pitching criticism that he had, some points I thought were legitimate and reasonable and worth the Mets taking under advisement. I think others and the overall tone felt very like a disgruntled ex-player, and it's hard to really kind of figure out what to do with them, because I think there are legitimate criticisms of how Carlos Mendoza manages his bullpen and which guys are going in and which guys are in the circle of trust. And I do think that it does, because the Mets used so many pitchers last year, it is worth doing the autopsy. It is worth doing the self-reflection as to how they got there and what they can do better. But I don't think the Mets are doing something that everybody else in baseball isn't. It's not like they are building their starting pitching staff and their bullpen differently than the rest of baseball. I mean, the team that just won the World Series spent most of the year with Shohei Ohtani on the shelf, with Yamamoto missing time, Kershaw missed time, Glasnow missed time, Snell missed time. So it's not like the injury bug was just in Flushing, Queens, New York, and the Mets were the only team that had it. And so, yeah, do the Mets need to be better? Certainly. They overworked arms like Reed Garrett to the point where he just didn't have it in the second half when the team needed him the most. But I just don't think the Mets are going rogue on the rest of the league and doing something that nobody else has done. So it was very weird to hear him phrase the criticism the way that he did, and talking about how he needed to step in front when he was there last year and save these guys from themselves. It was very weird and something I just didn't expect to come out. Yeah, so I kind of dumped my thoughts initially to it, but I'll let you share, and I guess we could talk about it because there's a lot to get into with what he said.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways I had about his, I don't want to call it a rant. It wasn't a rant. It was a breakdown of the Mets pitching situation. He seemed to point a lot of the blame at Carlos Mendoza, and my initial reaction was, what should Mendy have done in the season to prevent maybe some of the arm injuries that occurred to some of these relievers? Because at the end of the day, Chris, the starting pitching wasn't giving the Mets enough depth and length in games. They weren't getting to the sixth inning or through the sixth inning with any consistency. We saw, I mean, I can't count on two hands how many starts we saw of pitchers not even making it through 5 innings this year. So on one hand, I understand the sentiment of, hey, Mendy's overworking these bullpen guys. They're pitching too many days in a row, or they're pitching too many innings this season. But what is Carlos Mendoza supposed to do as a manager when his starting pitching, which he also needs to think about preserving, is getting up into the 90s, 100s pitch counts in the fourth and fifth innings, and still at the same time somehow preserve his bullpen arms. So that was my initial thought, and I don't really know how to process that other than maybe taking a look at David Stearns and the way that he's constructed this roster. And I read a breakdown from The Athletic that they repushed in the wake of Adam Ottavino's comments recently about, are the Mets doing something different or, I guess, worse in how they're using their relief pitchers? And the takeaways are kind of not really. They, over the last 2 years, the Mets ranked 21st in relief appearances on consecutive days, so bottom 10 in the league in terms of using guys multiple days in a row. Of 58 pitchers who have appeared in 70 or more games in either of the last 2 seasons, only 3 were the Mets, and all of them were Tyler Rogers and Gregory Soto, who were trade deadline acquisitions this season, who are already on pace for that many games, and then Phil Maton last year, who, same case. There are 62 pitchers who compiled at least 70 innings in relief in either of the past 2 seasons. Only Tyler Rogers was the only Met was Tyler Rogers. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I don't know if it's Carlos Mendoza's fault or if it's a usage thing. The Athletic instead started to point to David Stearns and not just the construction of the roster in terms of the starting pitchers that he brought in, because obviously those guys like Clay Holmes, you can't really expect him to consistently go 6-7 innings as a converted closer, right? Guys like Sean Manaea, who had an injury that he was dealing with, or Kodai Senga, those guys were coming off of, either for Manaea's case, a season where he was just ramping up for the first time in a while since becoming a reliever, going into 2024, pitching more innings than he normally had in the seasons before that. Kodai Senga had a 1-game appearance in 2024, was expected to pitch more innings. And then
we'll always have that one game.
We always will have that one start.
Always have that one start.
But The Athletic also points to the way the Mets have had their rehab outings go with some of these pitchers, with A.J. Minter coming off of a hip thing and then pitching very frequently early in the season. Brooks Raley coming back from Tommy John, pitching very frequently. Max Kranick, a guy that hadn't pitched more than, I think, like 50 innings in a season and was on pace for more than 100. And so The Athletic points a lot to how the Mets are constructed and the way David Stearns kind of gets his hands dirty in rehab assignments and how those things play out, which I thought was really interesting, because I think Ottavino's criticism was very much on Mendoza, where the more, take a step back, 10,000 foot angle is maybe this is more on David Stearns than it is on Mendy.
Well, yeah, and I think that's where the criticism is fair. Like the way the Mets orchestrated and put together their both their rotation and their bullpen last year, it failed them. Right, the construction of that group didn't work. And I think there are a variety of different reasons why it didn't work. You had underperformance and injury in the rotation. I think you had certain arms in the bullpen get overworked, although I find it notable that the guy who threw the most, appeared in the most amount of games for the Mets last year was Edwin Diaz, who didn't get hurt at all, right? Like, and so it's just, it's fair to say that the Mets didn't get what they needed to out of their bullpen, and they may need to reevaluate how they construct it. But to act like the Mets are this outlier, and I'll read the quote from Ottavino's live stream, quote, "This is embarrassing." And he had a list of injuries up, which included Tyler McGill, which I don't know how that's on the Mets. Like, I don't know how Tyler McGill's injury is on the way maybe there's more to it than we understand, but I don't know how Tyler McGill's usage played into his injury. He wasn't utilized any more than he normally was as a starter. But, quote, "This is embarrassing. This is actually pathetic, like pathetic. I wouldn't have never let this happen if I was on the team last year. At least half of these guys wouldn't have blown out. I would have protected these dudes myself. I would have had to jump in front of them myself. Unfortunately, there was nobody willing to stand up and talk to Carlos this year. It was just me, I guess. So a little bit of an issue there," end quote. So the other takeaway here is he's kind of throwing the team under the bus outside of Carlos Mendoza, that nobody spoke up for these guys. The rant seemingly came out of nowhere. It was all over the place. He also talked about, Brandon Nimmo, who he clearly is fond of. And Brandon Nimmo, his name being on the trade block, Ottavino shared that he doesn't think Nimmo's going to take too kindly to that Nimmo apparently was upset that Andy Martino put Alex Verdugo in the Subway Series team over Brendan Nimmo. Apparently, Nimmo upset that Lindor was named the captain or is the de facto captain. There's a lot going on there that needs to be kind of dealt with. But yeah, I think some fair points from Ottavino, and I think they deserve the time and attention to be looked into because he was there. This isn't somebody like you or I saying this who's completely on the outside. He was there not in 25, but he was there in 24. He was there with Carlos Mendoza. So he's not just pulling this out of thin air and making it up. He clearly feels this way from what he saw. And I think part of it is Carlos Mendoza needs to learn and evolve as a manager. I don't think anybody would say he has a sparkling record when it comes to his bullpen usage and who he uses and which guys he deploys in certain spots. I think it's been a criticism of mine of Carlos Mendoza when it comes to leaving starters in too long, taking starters out too quickly, going to the wrong bullpen guy, not playing the right matchup. I mean, I think it all is something that he needs to get better at as a manager. And so overall, I think my overall takeaway is I'm not like up in arms with Adam Ottavino. It did at times feel like somebody who felt, burned by the team, that they didn't bring him back or whatever. But I don't think that invalidates anything that he said. And I do think I don't think it's this like startling indictment that the Mets have the wrong manager and they need to move on from Carlos Mendoza. I don't think it's that. I just think it is, this team is still trying to find their footing. And with a lot of the rumors about what they're considering doing this offseason, I think that's more true than ever. David Stearns is really trying to put his fingerprints on this roster. And I do think because of how bad last year went, everything needs to be evaluated. And if they just try to run out a similar bullpen strategy this next year of, hey, we'll have the two guys that we count on, we'll rotate the rest of them, and we'll just churn roster spots, okay, then I think you're running the risk of, if you don't pick the right guys, following a similar fate to what happened last year. So we wanted to touch on it. It was a big story. I don't think it's this big indictment on Carlos Mendoza that other people think it is, but I do think it is somebody who was on the team very recently, saying that it does need to be taken into account, yeah. I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I opened the show saying I felt a little worried or concerned or not happy about the future of the Mets. And I think the biggest thing that I am worried about on that note is Ottavino, when he was talking about Brandon Nimmo and the potential trade talks and everything, mentioned David Stearns is not the best communicator with the team. And in an article in The Athletic, I'm citing them again, but after the end of the season, they also pointed to a club source said that Carlos Mendoza was not the best at communicating as well. And I think when it comes to putting together a successful roster and building a team, trust between the front office and the coaching staff and the players is super important. And communication is like the base level of that. And so I'm really hoping throughout this offseason that both Stearns and Mendoza are keeping an open line with the players. It's always brutal news when you hear, the Mets made this offseason acquisition on social media and players come out and say, that's the first I heard of it. Like, I found out at the same time that social media did. I would hope that the general manager and the manager or president of baseball operations, the manager, are talking to the players more with an open dialogue going into 2026. I hope maybe that will create the bridge that the Mets need to get back into a contention mindset for 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean the Mets last season was a complete failure, right? The entire season was a failure, and so everything needs to be evaluated, like everything, not just the players that are on the roster, but how the team does everything. And so, if Adam Ottavino is shining a light on this, forces the Mets to look internally and maybe reevaluate their processes or processes. What would that processes?
Yeah.
Then that's a good thing, right? Because it makes the Mets a better organization. Just sticking your head in the sand and pretending like things don't exist, I think is a fast track to not reaching the goals that this organization wants to reach. The coaching staff finalized, and it's mainly because they were waiting to make the hiring of Justin Willard, the new pitching coach, official. It was really the only thing we were waiting on. They made it official, although I think Justin Willard made it official before the Mets made it official because he appeared on a podcast and was introduced as the new pitching coach. Then the Mets made it official via a social media graphic with all of their coaches. This was the expected move. David Stearns wouldn't comment on it because they were still dotting I's, crossing T's, but they got it done, and so the coaching staff is all put together. It is a brand spanking new coaching staff for Carlos Mendoza. And, to the point that Adam Ottavino made, and maybe this is the last thing I'll say on it, hopefully the new voices can maybe push the Mets and Willard and Kai Correa, the bench coach. Maybe they can push Mendy to be better when it comes to the handling of these pitchers, because, Jeremy Hefner was a great communicator in working with the pitchers, but did he, push back on the usage in the right ways? We just don't know because we're not in the room, right? And so Carlos Mendoza is the manager, so he gets all the blame. It lays at his feet regardless. But I don't know how it all worked together. But the Mets made their coaching staff official, and now they can get to more pressing things like adding to this roster.
Yeah, I like the coaching staff. We broke it down a lot more in depth, either our last episode, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
And talked about guys like Troy Snitker, Kai Correa. You brought up Justin Willard before he was officially hired and kind of what he could bring. I saw him on that podcast appearance. I think it was the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast. And he was asked, how do you approach working with pitchers at the major league level? How did you get Garrett Crochet, for instance, to be the success story that he was with the Red Sox last year? And his thing was, I basically look at a pitcher and I figure out what their superpower is, and then I figure out what is the line that we can toe for maximizing the superpower before we hit the diminishing returns or a point where it's no longer working very well. So for Crochet, he talked about he's a cross-body guy, so where he places his foot can, at a certain point, be really the perfect position to maximize, he called the cross-bodiness of that movement and make his pitches look the most confusing. But if he goes too far, it can throw off his control and his command and get him into stickier situations. And so he brought up Jonah Tong specifically with his funky arm slot. What can we do to maximize him and other Mets pitchers in terms of what they do best? And that's, I think, kind of the perfect philosophy to have. I think having a player-first mentality, but also trying to focus it into a way that we can maximize success in the strike zone is going to be massive for the 2026 Mets pitching staff.
Yeah, and it's just going to be a fresh voice that probably has a fresh look on things, and maybe a different philosophy, although he's probably much in line with the way David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza want this to look, but definitely could maybe have some fresh ideas to maximize, especially when the Mets are right now in the middle of a really interesting time with the three young starters, and they have more coming in the pipeline. They could add some in free agency or via trades here in the offseason. So starting fresh with a new voice, a new vision to help those three, Tong, Sproat, and McLean, the ones that are on the roster right now, but whoever may come through the door after that is a really encouraging thing. And definitely one of the, Hefner was somebody that, if I was going to pick somebody to keep around from the staff, he would be the guy, but I understood why they did it. So really, really intrigued to see what Willard can bring to the table.
I think the last thing I'll say on this too is you mentioned bringing in a new voice in Justin Willard. And I think one thing I also liked about this Mets coaching staff is the assistant pitching coach, Dan McKinney, was the Binghamton Rumble Ponies pitching coach last year. And so he's worked with some of these younger guys. So having that balance of, okay, we have the familiarity with a guy that worked with some of our young pitching prospects in the minor leagues, specifically Jonah Tong, he worked over the course of 3 seasons with, and then having this new guy come in with a little bit of extra perspective. How can we tweak some small things here and there? Is a very good match. It's a good yin and yang for the Mets pitching coaching situation going forward.
Also, very importantly, Francisco Alvarez is personal hitting coach. I joke but he was credited for a lot of the success that Alvy had when he came back from AAA. JP Arancibia is the catching coach at the big league level,
yes,
but also will probably be working very closely on the hitting side with Francisco Alvarez because after he came back from his stint in the minors after getting demoted, just a different player. So JP Arancibia, who was down in Syracuse, played a major role in that. So coaching staff finalized, a lot of new faces, a lot of fresh faces. And so that can both be good and bad. It may take some time for it to gel, but also it's encouraging that they're not maintaining the status quo, that they also understand how bad last year was. Okay, we're going to end on a good note. We're going to end with the dream offseason. Now, I got a lot of moves. For the dream offseason.
Okay.
There are two that I think we'll agree with because I don't know your list. You don't know my list. I think we're both going to have Tatsuya Imai as a free agent acquisition for the New York Mets.
Yes.
Everything about this guy I love. I love his demeanor. I love what he said about striking out Ohtani. That's going to play in New York. That's going to endear him with the people of New York. The pitch stuff profile is awesome. There's a bunch of pitches. Feels like he would fit right in to what the New York Mets want in a starter. We know the Mets are going to be looking for a starter, and David Stearns may not want to spend big on, Valdez or Dylan Cease or Michael King, but Imai feels like somebody he might be interested in, stretching his rules a little bit to get somebody like that to be a number 2 and number 3 starter. And I know you're also a fan of his as well. Just everything you read about him, everything you see in the statistics of what he was able to do over there, you just feel like it's a profile that will play over here in the majors.
Yep. I don't have really anything to add there. You kind of hit it all. Tatsuya Imai is I think the top of my list as far as free agent pitching acquisitions.
Do you have a Tariq Skubal trade on your list?
Yes.
Because I have a Tariq Skubal trade on my list as well. Yeah, I know it's going to cost a lot, and I know it's going to hurt with some of the names that you see in the alert that Jeff Passan's going to send to us all this offseason when Tariq Skubal becomes a New York Met. But I don't think it matters who's on the list. And then sign him to an extension, and then you have Tariq Skubal as your ace for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know if he's available officially, right? Like, there's a lot of speculation about if the Tigers are going to keep him, if they're going to end up signing him to an extension. He is the face of the team right now, period. Like, not among hitters or not among pitchers. Like, he is the quintessential Tiger and the representation of what that team looks like. However, a lot of signs seem to be pointing to trade talks picking up, or there's been plenty of speculation that it can/will happen. I will again point to The Athletic, and they laid out some potential trade value propositions for who certain teams might need to give up to get Tariq Skubal. And for the Mets, it was Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat, Jet Williams, and Ronnie Mauricio, which was, I thought, an interesting to throw in there.
Where do I sign?
But I love Jonah Tong with my whole heart. I think he's such a wholesome kid.
Sure.
Like, I love the idea of a Mets version of Tim Lincecum with that weird arm slot, and I think he projects as a successful pitcher.
Yep, he's not Tariq Skubal.
Skubal just won back-to-back Cy Young Awards and is was a finalist last year and is maybe top 3 pitcher in baseball, depending on how you feel about Garrett Cole and Paul Skeens. Maybe top 1. He's 29. Like, it just, everything fits like the David Stearns philosophy of, I'm not going to give a 30-plus-year-old pitcher a multi-year deal, but like a 29-year-old guy who's at the peak of the game right now seems like an easy decision.
Yeah, and if the Athletic package could get it done, I would do it in a heartbeat. I don't think it gets it done, but if that's the move that gets it done, and you keep Carson Benj and you keep Nolan McLean, like, I'm in.
Yeah.
Like, where do I sign to make that a reality? So yeah, part of the dream off season for me would be trading for Tariq Skubal. Do you have Edwin Diaz coming back as part of your dream off season?
I do have Edwin Diaz.
So then we have three overlaps. Yeah,
So you flip flop back to
no. I don't think the Mets will bring him back. I would bring him back in a dream off season.
You want to bring him back.
I want to bring him back.
That's the dream.
Yeah, the dream is that he comes back. I don't think the Mets will bring him back. I think I've made it very clear why I don't think they will bring him back. Just because I think it's counter to everything David Stearns believes in. But I'd give him the 5-year contract and just move on with my life and have Edwin Diaz as the closer. Like,
Yeah, I think for me, the thesis I kind of put for my overall dream offseason for the Mets is this is the time for Steve Cohen to flex his big money wallet, because as things stand right now, there is a collective bargaining agreement negotiation coming after the 2026 season. There is a very good chance that we either end up with a shortened or zero 2027 season as ownership across the league, outside of maybe a couple Steve Cohen's and Dodgers owners of the world, push for a salary cap in baseball. There is no better time for Steve Cohen to be spending his money than in the 2026 offseason when there's no salary cap still. The Mets have over $180 in estimated money to work with if they want to push back up to the payroll that they had to end the 2025 season. There are some big money names on the free agent market, and Edwin Diaz is one of those. As an elite closer, it will cost the Mets a significant amount because of that, but I just think this is the offseason to do it.
Yeah, I think you because if you don't, you're just always going to be searching for somebody who can be like Edwin Diaz, right? Like there's a handful of closers, maybe 3 or 4 in the sport that you just know are going to lock it down. And Edwin Diaz is one of those guys. It's an adventure sometimes. The heart rate monitor, my fitness tracker goes off and it says calm down a little bit while I'm watching Edwin Diaz. I get it, but I mean, it's just he's one of the best closers, if not the best closer in the game. So yeah, you bring him back in a dream offseason. Okay, now I think this is where things get weird because I'm going to guess in a dream offseason you bring Pete Alonso back and I don't.
I did not bring Pete Alonso back.
Okay, so we're both in agreement that in the dream offseason, Pete is moving on. He's going someplace else.
Yeah, I will give our listeners and viewers a look behind the curtain here and say that not my biggest, but one of the top players on my proverbial wish list for the Mets this offseason is already off the board. And I wanted them to at least be in on a bidding for Josh Naylor. He has already, as of the time of this recording, not as of the time of our last recording, but as of the time of this recording, signed a deal with the Seattle Mariners to stick around and play first base for them for the next 5 years, I think.
592.5 is the
that was a blow to my dream offseason at first base.
Well, there's just a better option. You can just get Cody Bellinger. That's what you do.
That is also who I had as an option on my dream offseason list.
We think way too similarly.
Yeah, I had him in because plus defender, can play first. He can also play center, depending on how the Mets feel about Carson Bench to start the season. And I just think that's a really nice fit in terms of his power bat as well. He looked really good with the Yankees last year. Obviously, not going to have the short porch in right field, but I mean, I was looking at some of the spray chart stuff, and he was hitting the ball further out than he needed to at Yankee Stadium. So I feel good about Bellinger as a Mets addition.
I will throw another name in there because I think you can have Belly be either the DH or he can play first base. Another name that I think the Mets should go after this offseason, somebody who provides great defense, but another left-handed bat to mix into the lineup. I'd be all over Ryan O'Hearn. Who played with the Padres after the trade deadline last year, was with Baltimore, provides great defense, is a left-handed bat, but also has some pop, and I don't think it's going to cost you a ton of money. And so that gives you options where and part of my dream offseason would be trading Brendan Nimmo. I know that's going to probably bother a lot of people, but I think freeing up that left field spot I think is important, and that Nimmo contract I think is going to continue to age poorly. And so if you can free up left field to where O'Hearn can play out there, you can put Belly out there, you can move Taylor to a corner spot if you want to, although it's not great out there for Taylor in a corner. You probably will want him playing center, but you're going to have Carson Bench up at some point, so you want to keep center field pretty open. But I think to have O'Hearn and Bellinger with a freed up first base in my dream offseason, a freed up left field in my offseason, a DH spot that you're going to need to have somebody for, to have a player like O'Hearn that can play all 3 of those spots and you can kind of rotate through, I think is a really, really nice luxury to have because the Mets are kind of landlocked in some spots. And so having guys that can move all over the place just brings a bunch of flexibility for Carlos Mendoza, where he wants to give Juan Soto a day off his legs and have him DH. Bellinger can go play right field, right? I mean, he can play all 3 outfield positions for you pretty well. Can also play first base. So just the flexibility, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you have any other big acquisitions in terms of names for this dream off season? I have a couple.
Define big. Or define big.
Like, are they in on any of the top free agents according to most outlets? Like Bo Bichette?
Bo Bichette? Yeah, I considered Bichette a little bit, but I
put Bichette in on my list.
So you have them trading Jeff McNeil.
I have them trading Jeff McNeil. I think
that's the only way that opens up.
Right. I think that's a potential piece that the Mets could use in a big trade for a big name pitcher like Skubal, or I even had ask the Pirates about Paul Skeens. At least have a phone call, right? And offer them a major league veteran player to add to that roster. The Mets have a issue where they have too many middle infielders, and most of them have not proven good enough to stick around. And Brett Baty is, you think, your opening day third baseman, but then you're left with like Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, who is already named in a potential Skubal trade. You've got Jeff McNeil, obviously. Jet Williams is a middle infielder / outfielder that also would conflict with like a Bellinger signing, a Ryan O'Hearn, a Carson Bench playing in the majors. So I felt like the biggest way to solve the second base problem specifically is just give the bag to the guy that's the top option in free agency there and let the rest either go in trades or walk, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mets are going to try this offseason to remake this roster in a pretty big way. I think they're going to try. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it all off, but they're certainly going to give it an effort. I'm trying to look here because Devin Williams is a name that I think makes some sense for the Mets. I do. I think it's a buy low opportunity to get him on a 1-year deal. He's going to look for a bounce back spot. I know it didn't work in New York with the Yankees, but I don't think it was because of New York that's why it didn't work. I think there's other stuff that happened. Pete Fairbanks could make some sense, but that's a free agent. I'm trying to look through to see if there's any like rumors of relievers getting moved here this winter, because I do think the Mets could trade for a closer in the wake of maybe not getting Edwin Diaz, but also in addition to Edwin Diaz, they could trade for somebody to be their 8th inning guy alongside Diaz. I'm not seeing anybody that like pops off the page for me as like a gotta have it type option, but I do think the Mets are going to sniff around, and so I'll add Devin Williams as a free agent name to my list because I do think he makes some sense.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know if I'm in on him being a success story in 2026. I just think it's hard to project a reliever as improving. It's just a lot easier to project that relievers are going to regress even further.
For sure. Who else on your list?
I put Okamoto, who we've mentioned a couple times here, as a potential first base signing as well. I think my list, I didn't put specific guys. I just kind of said like, I hope that the Mets are in on at least bidding for this player.
Yeah, for sure.
So I put like several first base options with Josh Naylor. Okamoto was one of them. He actually just got posted yesterday or 2 days ago. And Cody Bellinger I also had. So essentially my dream is letting Pete Alonso walk and figuring out another solution there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in full agreement. I mean, I just think the Mets defensively hurt themselves with Pete being back, and if you put him at DH, it landlocks that spot. And I just think after Josh Naylor got 5 years, I think that's what Pete's going to be looking for, and I just don't think that's a contract that ages well for the Mets. And I just don't see them doing it. And if that's what it takes to get Pete, like, that's not part of my dream offseason, locking myself in, because I don't think it makes the Mets a better team. I was just thinking about this because we mentioned Bo Bichette. Is there a world where you could get Bichette and play him at third and move Baty to second, depending on what you think the best defensive configuration is for those two?
Yeah, I don't know.
Baty at third and Bichette at second, they're natural positions, maybe. But Baty, I thought, played well at second last year.
Right. I agree. I don't know. It's the Brett Baty thing is also like a weird part of this conversation.
They could trade Baty for Skubal. Like, he could be in the Skubal trade. For all we know.
I'm not fully sold on Brett Baty. I think of the 15 third base options the Mets have right now, like, I think Brett Baty's number one on that list.
That has everything to do with Mark Vientos having a down year this year. Like,
I was going to say, also my dream offseason is get Mark Vientos in the lab. I don't care if it's the steroids lab. Like, get that guy right for 2026, because his bat can be such an impact when it's right, like it was in 2024. But I don't know. It's like a weird... The Bo Bichette conversation really reminds me of the Carlos Correa conversation from a couple years ago, where it's like, this guy's the top infielder, and what he brings in terms of average as well as power is the reason he's near the top of the free agent market this offseason. I just don't know where the Mets slot him in, because I don't know what they project for Brett Baty and Mark Vientos in 2026.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. As we sit here, the Mets have first base open. They're trying to trade their second baseman, reportedly. They are potentially trading their left fielder. I don't know if we love the options that they have at third base. They're keeping center field open for a prospect. Like, there's a lot of question marks, and
yeah,
it does feel like they're going to be very active. I mean, there was a rumor this morning that they're interested in Brandon Donovan.
interesting. I didn't see that.
So like that.
But I was going to say, like, the rotation has
Sure.
like 5 question marks
Yeah,
as well.
plenty.
Because
right
Jeff
now,
Passan of ESPN said Kodai Senga is very available in trade talks. So, like, that's going to be a spot that the Mets need to fill. We don't know what. I mean, Frankie Montas is gone. The Mets parted ways with him after he exercised his player option. But, like, David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, like, these are guys we don't know what the Mets' plans for them are going forward.
yeah, just so many questions. And I think part of doing this dream offseason exercise this year, we did it last year as well, but it just feels like it's more. We had some of the similar names, but the names on the list feel more realistic this year because the Mets have so much work to do.
Yeah.
Like, they have so much work that needs to be done to this roster. And I think, I don't know how much sleep David Stearns has gotten so far this offseason.
Right. I mean, you think about last offseason, the only holes that we perceived in the 2025 roster were like second base, center field,
Starter.
and a starter.
They lost Sevy and Manaea before bringing Manaea back.
But, like, it was very quickly where we had Soto, which filled
Yeah, it just
the
filled up
roster
the room.
hole.
Yeah, filled up the room.
We had Mark Vientos, who we thought was going to be the easy everyday third baseman. We thought Nimmo in left or center. We had Tyrone Taylor, who had played decently well in center. And then we had the idea of a Brandon Sproat potentially coming up and contributing on the major league level. Now we have, like, Nolan McLean as, like, our locked-in starting pitcher, and Francisco Lindor at short, and Soto and right. And Alvarez at catcher. Like, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, everything else is up in the air. Everything else is up in the air. So it should make for a fun offseason. We shared some of the things that we would like the Mets to do, and we're just going to sit back and wait and react to whatever is in the cards this offseason for David Stearns and company. If you are new here, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening to us. If you want to watch the show, you can do so over on the YouTube channel. Just search Jack McKessy, McKessy, and you can watch the podcast over there as well. We're back next week. Whatever the latest happenings are in Metsland, we will be here to break it all down and share our thoughts. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.